Okay, I'll go ahead and call the Finance Committee meeting to order, and record the time, and then take the roll.
Okay, Alderman Holfer,
Here.
Alderwoman Day is excused, Alderman Craig.
Here.
Did I just say your name, Dennis?
Cheehy.
Chee. What
Here.
is it?
Cheehy.
Chee. Okay, sorry. John Howard.
Here.
Joe Mercado.
Yep, you got it.
And then Mohammed Nauman is excused. And then Director of Administration is Mayor's.
Okay. Let's go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is citizens' comment period. I don't see anybody in the audience waiting to share with us, so we'll go ahead and close the citizens' comment period and move on to item number 3, which is approval of the November 22, 2022 meeting minutes. It's been a while since we've gathered, but they are presented or included in your packets. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at them. If there's any comments, otherwise we'll take a motion.
Move to approve as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of November 22, 2022. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to the main order of business, I think, today, and that includes presentation of the 2022 annual financial reporting. Danielle, if you want to make the introductions, I think we've got a special guest here to share some details and comments with us as well.
Yes, so I'm Danielle Brown. I'm the new finance director. I started in the middle of June, meaning I came in the middle and towards the end of the auditing period. So my team had put a lot of this together already. It had been working with our auditors, Clifton Larson Allen. The reports were final and issued as of July 31st. And then I have Jake, what is your last name again? Linnell. I got Jake Linnell here from CLA. I had Mr. Anderson on the agenda, but he is out on maternity leave. So, so Jake is going to step in and present the audit for us. Whenever you're ready, Jake.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. Again, just a quick sound check here. You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
And Danielle, if I were to share my screen, will that be something this whole group can see? Or
Yes.
Okay. So let me go ahead and do that. You can tell me if the City of Franklin audit results is now showing.
Yes, if you could just zoom it in a little bit.
Sure.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yep.
We have that as a handout as well.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you for letting us join you here today, in particular remotely. The original plan that Danielle mentioned is Mike Anderson would be joining us. He was intended to be up at a client in Sheboygan and was going to join, so we were intending to join remotely. I'm actually about 15 minutes up the road from you right now, so I think we might have spent as much time playing with the laptops as it would have taken me to drive down to see you, but good intentions here. And really the reason behind both of us attending tonight, Mike works more closely directly with all of your team members across the city as we go through the audit process. He's the manager in charge of our staff as well as reviewing the work that our staff do. And really in that direct kind of contact role with not only Danielle, but with Tom, with other members of the finance and extended extended city team as we work through the audit process. And my role as the engagement principal is really that overall review to make sure that we, as your audit team, have done everything that needs to be done to be able to issue our audit opinion that accompanies the financial statements, and really just that kind of overall quality responsibility. So, I wanted Mike here in case you had the tough questions for me, but I am actually fairly involved in the audit process as well. So, looking forward to any commentary you have. So, really what I put together here today is just a very high-level summary of some of the key aspects of our audit process, as well as a couple of financial highlights as it relates to the 2022 financial information. So the first of which is really just the opinion that we issued as a result of our audit procedures, and that opinion is an unmodified opinion, or what's commonly referred to as a clean opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that we can provide you as your auditors that the financial statements are free of any material misstatement. So it's not a test of every single transaction that's entering the city. It's really based on the risks of what can get reported incorrectly and designing tests around that, designing tests around the strong internal controls that you have in place to see that they're operating the way they were intended to operate, and being able to test some of those year-end balances to make sure that those financials are appropriately supported. And that's really what the opinion is saying that we as your auditors have done, is we've performed those tests to be able to provide assurance that those financial statements are materially correct. When talking about the financials, I did bring just a little bit of high-level financial information, and I thought I would just spend a minute. I know that 2022 is fairly old news at this point, but I did want to just bring forth a couple of the highlights from the financial information for each of the more significant areas. So starting in the handout that I have here, if you're looking at the general fund, the 4th column of numbers, the change in fund balance number, is the number that I'd like to just provide a little context around as it relates to some of these major funds. So the general fund added about $1.5 million to fund balance as of the end of 2022. And that compares very favorably to your budget. The budget anticipated a loss during the year, and a significant portion of that was really tied to a budgeted contingency expenditure of about $2.2 million. So without having to exercise those contingency funds, without having to utilize those budgeted dollars, you really went from an expected loss to actually adding to fund balance. And in addition to that, there was about $800,000 in public safety expenses that were under budget as well. So, kind of a combination of the contingency fund that's really there for the unknowns, as well as the additional public safety expenditures. That's really what was driving the positive change in fund balance as opposed to the expected use of fund balance. There was a little bit on the revenue side. Building permit revenue was up in excess of what budgeted revenues were, as well as investment income. But the lion's share of the change in fund balance was really driven by those expenditure savings compared to budget. As I talked through some of the other major funds, debt service fund, that's typically a fairly break-even fund where you're levying funds each year to repay your principal and interest balances. So you don't expect to see a whole lot of increase in fund balance. And similarly this year, that was the case. You do maintain a little bit of funds as you have differences in expected payoffs and those types of things over time. But that's really just an in and out as you levy funds for general obligation debt service. The TIF funds, those will accumulate funds over time or can be in a deficit as well, depending on the timing and the progression of the project. So for each of your districts that are open and collecting increment, those increment dollars have to get deposited for that specific TIF fund and need to be used specifically for the TIF project plan. So as you see those dollars accumulate, those are dollars that cannot be redirected to other general city purposes. There are times where you can amend TIFs to transfer funds between them, but as a general rule, those dollars need to be utilized for the purposes in which they were originally collected towards. And similarly with your non-major governmental funds, you have a number of special revenue and capital projects funds that have smaller earmarked dollars in terms of revenues that are collected either through charges for services or grants to fund specific purposes. And so, again, you may have some small accumulations year over year or uses of those fund balances year over year, and you can continue to build those reserves and use them towards those designated purposes. And then aside from the governmental funds, you also have your utility funds, your water and your sewer utilities. Those are primarily funded with charges for services. The water being the charges for services that are regulated by the PSC, meaning if you wanted to alter those rates, you would go through a formal application process with the PSC as they review the revenues and the accumulations and the expenditures within that fund, whereas the sewer utility is not regulated by the PSC, so that those rates are actually set by council. So the increase you see in the water utility of $482,000, that's really the function of the user fees as it relates to water usage being in excess of the normal operating costs to operate the water utility. So those can fluctuate depending on usage year over year. And then on the sewer side of things, you can see a use of fund balance or change in that position of $1.4 million. And that's really a function of there is a substantial amount of depreciation of contributed capital assets. So when a developer contributes sewer treatment or another party has contributed those assets, the depreciation on those dollars is not really the cost of the sewer utility, so to speak, and the rates are not trying to recover those dollars because those are not city expenses that drove those asset additions. So that kind of takes you through a high level. I did just want to keep my comments there brief. As I said, I know the information is a little bit dated at this point, but did just want to provide that context around some of the high level financial information. We also have information listed here related to the letters that accompany these financials. The key pieces of information that I'll point out related to that, as it relates to the accounting policies, the one new one that you had this year was related to leases and being able to bring that financial information into the financial statements in a new format and a new requirements as it relates to how GASB requires that information to be presented. So we were able to work with your team to implement that new standard and bring that additional information into the financial statements as required. And that was really new for all communities across the country, really, in terms of not all of them have leases that they have to disclose, but if it was applicable, this was new for everyone this year. As it relates to accounting estimates, included in our governance letter, we highlight the more significant ones. And it's really just in the context of, as you bring this financial information to close each year, you do have to make certain estimates in relation to those account balances. And so what we do as your auditors in relation to those estimates is review them for consistency in accordance with what we'd expect for the industry, for like-minded communities or like-sized communities, and then really just with what your experience has been historically, if there were any large fluctuations in terms of experience versus what your estimates are currently based on. And we had no adjustments from that perspective. We did have one audit adjustment as it relates to the work that we performed. So as we performed that testing that I described earlier tonight, the result of that testing, in one area we did have an adjustment related to revenue recognition around one of your ARPA grants. So we were able to work through that with your team and get that adjustment made, and then made some recommendations for how that flow of transactions can be evaluated in the future, so that that's brought to a close prior to the start of audit work. So no, not anything that I would say is a significant lift or a significant change in the process, but including these transactions in that same level of review to be able to bring that to close in the future. And really, if we had any kind of disagreements or difficulties, we'd make you aware of that. But honestly, we'd be reaching out a little bit before the work was done, if that was the case. So, that's pretty typical to not have anything to disclose related to that in these types of letters. The bulk of the governance letter is actually management's representations around the financials, and essentially saying that management's accepting responsibility for those financials. This year is honestly a unique year in that, as Danielle mentioned, there's turnover at her position, turnover at the administrator position. Really just a lot to kind of wiggle through as you work through the audit process. But your team was very much in line with leaning in, taking on the extra work, raising their hands when they needed help with something. We were able to help with preparation of the financial statements and working through the revised timeline to make sure that you were able to meet your statutory requirements in terms of final issuance, and ultimately be able to bring this to close, and still have an unmodified opinion, a clean opinion, and a final deliverable here in accordance with the statutory guidelines. So, I know I covered a lot there, both from a numbers standpoint and from a context standpoint. Difficult to see if I'm getting some nods along here or not, but happy to answer any additional questions, happy to dive into anything that I maybe covered at a high level that you'd like to know a little bit more about.
Anybody have any comments or questions for Jake?
From what I'm hearing, no major issues, surprises, concerns, pretty much consistent with what we've done in the past.
Yeah, which is honestly a testament to the group, the new group, as well as the pre-existing group, to kind of leave it in a state to where it could be brought to close. To be able to work through a revised timeline and really be able to bring everything to close with not being around for when all the stuff actually went down. That's always a unique challenge, and I was happy we had full buy-in from the city staff to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Jake, this is also CLA's first year, the new contract, am I correct? In issuing the report?
No, I think this is, I think we're on year 3. I have so many years running through my head right now, to be honest with you.
I think it was 21 and 22.
Okay.
Yes, now that you say that, that does sound correct. So I think we were in person last year as we presented the results. Yes, now that I'm thinking through my years correctly. So it did kind of feel like a second first year though, with all the changes in place.
What can we expect for timeline next year if we have continuation of staff and whatever? I know the statutory limit for the state is what, July 31st, which we're meeting here. But what would be a normal routine?
In the past, the initial timeline was set up with field work start our audit testing beginning in that late March, early April timeframe, and that worked well for an issuance timeline that was early June. I think you could work your way back to that same calendar over time. I don't know if you do it all in one swoop or not, but that's something that we would continue to work with your staff on to talk through timelines and milestones as it relates to next year's work, and look to get a little bit more into that timeline that you had been in the past.
Other questions?
No, thank you for me.
John looks like he's pondering this.
Yes.
Was our timing an issue for Eilers or our bond notification? I know we have to do quarterly reporting on our outstanding debt issues. Is that an issue at all? During the year? Yeah, I thought there was quarterly stuff we submit to the public market.
For Ellers?
I thought there was a contractor who or go between
Yes.
bond outstanding bond issues. Want to check or make sure that
Try to make a difference.
sure they'll come for it.
I have sent them a copy of the audit already.
Okay.
Seems to me there was one large adjustment that you made that, talk about that one. I can't. Yes. Something about the deferred funds.
Yes, was the question on the audit adjustment that we had?
Yeah.
Essentially, wanted to make sure we got the revenue recognition correct for the ARPA funds. That's the COVID money. So it's a kind of a one-off grant. And going through that process, we were able to help the city make sure that the right revenue was reported related to those amounts. So it's kind of a unique grant in the way that it's used and the flexibility that's around it. So honestly, there's a number of communities that struggled with getting that reported in context with the way that the state and the regulators want to see that.
We're not losing any of those funds, though, are we?
No. This is a timing of revenue recognition, not a change in the total, just a change in the timing.
All right.
Any other questions for Jake? This is a little different format, I think, than we've seen in the past also. Is there a background for that, or I'm thinking of the terminology as I read through it. How do you refer to it as a basic financial statements or limited compared to what?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So in the past, you had done what's called a full annual comprehensive financial report. And part of making sure that we hit these deadlines of the July 31st timeframe was actually bringing that down to what the minimum level of basic financial statements are. And so your typical audit report had about it has 10-year comparative type information in there. You can get back to that level. And to your question on the timeline in the past, part of that was driven by that timeline as well, because the GFOA is the body that kind of regulates what goes into that full comprehensive report. And if you want to participate in that program, they require you to issue by June 30th. So when we knew the extra time was going to be needed in talking with your staff, we had to get down to the kind of the core basics, and we were going to be outside of that GFOA submission timeline anyway. So that is something, again, what we can revisit. You know, I don't know how much that information had been utilized or referred to. It is something that you can always bring back, and you've got the baseline information from previous years if needed. But it's also another ask on time. So you want to make sure that it's not preventing you from doing something more critical.
My question there would be, will that have an impact on our bond rating or information that the market looks to?
No. What can happen is there's a lot of data in those different tables in the back schedules. So there may be something where if Ellers was working with Moody's on a rating, they'd be able to provide them some information directly from that schedule, and they may need to request that information instead. But I would expect that to be very limited. But there isn't a performance downgrade from going from a ACFR down to a basic financial statement, because it does meet all of the requirements of the accounting standards.
Yeah, thanks for your comments there, Jake. Anything else?
Did you see any effect in a decline in internal controls due to the staffing turnover?
We did not.
That's more of a 23 issue.
It probably is. That's kind of where I was pausing there. The 22 information was fairly finalized. A lot of the turnover occurred late in the year, and you do have other backup procedures and people doing each other's work to be able to get through those things. So, I do expect that there's more risk of that in 23, and really where the risk is in having one person do multiple steps of the process, where in the past you probably had a little bit more segregation there. So that will be something that, as part of our planning for 23, we'll be looking to make sure we have coverage around those types of activities.
Anybody else?
Oh, I got it.
Well, Jake, we want to thank you for taking time and filling in tonight and speaking with us a little bit, and most of all, helping us work through this kind of anomaly, if you will, for fiscal year end 2022. And hopefully we're moving onward and forward from this point, have been as well. So thank you again.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your night.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Next item on our agenda, I think, is talking about some financial results for 2023. And there is a package of information that I think Danielle, assuming, has included and wants to talk about. Go ahead.
Yes, I don't have a whole lot of information, as I have been completely overwhelmed with the budgeting process and the learning experience. I've been taking about 8 hours of my week working with Paul Rotzenberg. So he has come back and he is mentoring me and helping me facilitate the budgeting process, learning the different dynamics of the position and what I need to do, what all gets included in the financial packets and the summaries, and he's got a lot of useful knowledge, and I'm just very appreciative of him. So I more just wanted to see if you guys had any questions after going through this. Again, I know I just have not had the time to put an entire financial summary report together for you, so I wanted to at least give you the revenues and expenditures for all of our funds for the first and second quarter. I know some of the revenues don't come in until July, so it might look a little wonky with not having those in here. But going through them, I didn't see many significant changes or areas that would be of issue. So if you guys just have any questions about these, about the expenses, any of the related funds.
Are there any specific areas that are running, are significantly off budget, I guess, would be the comment I would ask for you? As I look through these, I mean, briefly, it didn't see any large swings.
No, and I haven't noticed much of that either. The only thing I will say that the TID districts are something that Paul and I are working through. Some of the funds being in a deficit and trying to manage moving funds around between the different TIDs to balance that out until we get some more projects away.
Wasn't TID 1 supposed to close?
So we closed TID 3 in 22, and then TID 4 closed in April of 23.
Did you go by name on that, which,
Sure.
who it was, just to?
Yep, TID 3 is Northwestern Mutual TID, and then TID 4 is the Ascension Hospital.
Oh, that's right, okay, right by that.
And then when are we dispensing funds for that?
So TID 3 has already dispersed funds, but I believe we have a little bit of additional funding left over that needs to be dispersed. I think it may have just been a investment income in between the time that we dispersed it for like that next month, so it's a very small amount. TID 4, though, we haven't dispersed the funds yet. Actually, today I just finalized the signing of the closure audit with the auditors. So I should have a report for that, but I would assume very short we'll get those.
Is there a timeline for that, is there not?
Honestly.
I would check.
And then the Rock is caught up. Park Commons.
What do you mean?
They fell behind last year in their tech payments, if I remember correctly.
So
Right?
Yeah.
they are paid up through with their guarantee through TID 3.
All right. Just wanted to
Now,
make
are
sure.
they paid in full, or are they doing a payment?
Regarding their developer guarantee. So they paid in. Oh wait, no, I apologize. They have not. We billed them for 23. They haven't paid for 23. I'm sorry, I get these TIDs all mixed up. And we were just looking at this honestly on Friday. Paul and I were so.
Too busy expanding. Sorry, that's my
A lot of that too.
That's what
Yeah,
I
I think the issue there, the bigger issue is how fast the increase is coming on or the timing.
Okay.
So probably more detail. Year to year is kind of the Band-Aid that satisfies.
But like I said, they haven't paid their 23 guarantee.
The hotel looks like it's moving along.
And it probably won't be open until January. They're waiting at the elevator parts now.
Oh, really interesting.
Has there been any payments on TID 6?
So we have 3 developer guarantees in TID 6, and 2 of them have been paid. The third one not.
One down.
Could you refresh my memory on where that's located?
Yep, TID 6 is Loomis and Ryan.
What project is that?
That would be Copart, Strauss, and Bear Development.
Okay.
And if you saw on page 86 of the audit, TID 7 Velo Village is running with a $9 million fund balance. So again, Paul is working with me on some of those items. It does have an outstanding $1.5 million interfund loan that we will just be moving on the books to get that paid off, so we don't have to put that as the additional.
Right, and just as a refresher, Business Park overlays by my house on Oakwood and 34th Street, is that right? Those 3 warehouses, cheese factory? Is that it? Do we know? Just curiosity
If
question.
anybody knows,
Mary, do you know?
I can see it on the map, but I don't.
On 27th and Oakwood, I always want to say Sargento.
Is Saputo?
Oh, Saputo, yes.
That's what that is?
Yes.
All right.
Saputo, Wangard,
Is that considered TID 8?
yes.
Are there other TID agreements with developers that have not been or
So the only one that I can think of, and again, I could be wrong, but I know Ballpark Commons is not been paid. Copart and Strauss have, their development has not. We don't have any outstanding with TID 7. I'm honestly not sure about today at the moment.
Nice job. Thinking from fire hoses. Holy cow.
I won't lie, that's how I feel. It's been a very long 2 months, very overwhelming, but it's been working very well.
What's our internal process for following up on this? Here.
That's something that I have Tom, the accounting supervisor. But I'm not really sure on that. So please, any advice? I mean,
I just didn't know if we're following
Yeah.
that and when we're saying, kind of like we talked about room tax, where we've got people that haven't paid for a period of time, what's the process for following up?
I'll tell you.
Understand you're under,
Yep.
you're
So,
short-staffed.
again, the more that I talk about it, the more that I think about it, and I have no problem emailing you guys after the fact, but now that I'm thinking about it again, now that you say that, just on Friday, we were actually looking at the Ballpark Commons developers guarantee and why on our books it looks like they hadn't paid. What had happened is the finance team rolled it over to the tax roll, and actually Ballpark Commons paid the developer's guarantee portion of their taxes. They didn't pay the remainder of their taxes, so they are caught up for 22 with their guarantee. They have not paid 23 yet because they were billed that in 23. They have paid 22 because it was rolled over onto their taxes. Now I'm not sure if we didn't get far enough into looking at the other guarantees though to see if those got rolled over on the taxes, but I would assume that is the process.
John?
So I guess what I'd like to request for now, hopefully we have quorum so these can kick back into monthly, especially going into budget time. And if for next meeting, if that could be requested, an update on where we're at with those payments.
Yep, that was somewhere on the list, but absolutely.
And I did want to formally announce and thank Paul Rotzenberg for coming back as a consultant to get things. I mean, this is talk about the fire hose. Got that right? So we got. It was a pretty long process, which is a long process to fill these director positions, and it's something that we don't take lightly. And it's, we're very fortunate to have Danielle on. We welcome her, and also extremely fortunate that Paul Rotzenberg agreed to come back in that capacity.
Yeah, I think relative to the TIFs, this is probably more TIF activity than the city's had in quite a while in terms of number going at once. And I don't know what the latest environment have settled down, but I know there was others in the potential pipeline. But I think of the outstanding ones, Ballpark Commons and Woods Road are the two that we've got to keep an eye on them. The others seem like they should be coming along pretty well. And obviously, when you throw the pandemic and the wrinkle that throws in the timeline of those projects, it just adds more to the equation. But yes, I echo John's comments about wealth of knowledge there, so I urge you to take advantage of it best you can, because just that history background.
Well, and I just want to take a minute to apologize to the two of you. I have just sincerely been so overwhelmed between working with Paul and the budget to get back to you about meeting, but I'm hoping that through the rest of this meeting we can identify some areas on what the finance committee looks like, what needs to be presented here. I come from the village of Waterford where things were not as formal in a finance committee setting, in a village board setting.
Yeah, but you got to go to Crazy Train.
I used to work there too.
Ride my Harley there every weekend.
You know what? I'm not gonna lie. As soon as he walked in, I said, I know that guy. I have seen that face before. I worked
Tito's
there.
and Diet. He's walking in here. How'd you know?
But that being said, I've gone through a lot of the previous minutes and that kind of stuff to really get a grip on what goes to a finance committee meeting, what to look forward to at these upcoming ones, especially since the budget is being presented on September 19th. So I think that was then coming into number 8 and 9 as to where to go from here. So any advice would help.
Well, it's interesting that you make those comments, Danielle. Finance committee in Franklin is probably very unique, from what I'm told. But at the same time, it's really at the request of the mayor and the council. If they said, "Hey, we don't need those guys," I mean, John and I aren't going to be upset. I mean, our payroll's not going to be affected one way or the other, right?
But I heard you guys are crucial.
So a lot of that is at the request of the council. A lot of times the council presidents or the mayor or council members will say, "Hey, we have people over there with knowledge and experience. Let's run it over, run it by, ask their opinion, get their opinion." We're not decision makers. That's not our role. We're not elected. But at the same time, if there's not value to the council, I'm the first one to say, "Hey, we don't, I got other things I can do on Tuesday night, as well." So I think it has to be kind of a two-way street. In the past, it's been investments, it's been financing, it's been new construction, new projects, recommendations for, debt issuance, investment agreements, kind of that stuff, which I think many council members will vehemently say they're not elected based on their financial, education and background. It's not a requirement. So in many cases, they welcome or want that additional recommendation, advice, whatever you want to call it. But it's surely not a requirement, I guess, I would say. But I have been told, and most of it's probably been from prior employees and even people from the accounting side, said, "Man, we don't see communities have the type of support to council members that you have here." So in terms of an automatic agenda or every month, I mean, it's usually been financials, obviously, because that's our background, budget comparisons. But I mean, that information's all going back to the council. We see something that we think needs to raise the radar or be aware of, or forthright might be coming. I think that's kind of the role we've played. But other than that, I think it's really advisory.
But I think the committee adds a long-term perspective, not just reviewing financials, but I mean, where are we going? What are the concerns that are coming up? That to me is what's so much valuable.
Yeah, there probably is that component as well. Elected officials go for 2, 3, whatever their term is. Coming and going, these tips go for years. Bond issues go for years, rates up and down. I'm always constantly looking at some of those things and where we've been positioned. And I think for a few of us that have been around for a number of years, the city has progressed dramatically in terms of financial position. And I think it's warranted or verified by the public bond rating.
We're one of the few entities around that have their pensions liabilities.
Very unique kind of position.
Kind of echo Alderman Holfer's thoughts on that of having professionals that know this arena much better than myself. Obviously, I'm in this, but not only the knowledge base of it, but being able to kind of weigh both the past and the history, and also that, as you mentioned, that long-term view of like, okay, what's this going to look like 6 years from now, 7 years from now? Not just, all right, in 3 years, what are we at? Because that's when I'm up for re-election, sort of thing. It's a long-term view, and also taking that history into account of, okay, this is where we were, this is where we're going to, and here's how this is the pathway that would be the best path to take, so that we have mitigated risk, but also, that higher yield as far as what we're looking at.
Dennis, I want to go, and that you bring up a good point. I want to go back to and I'm going back in my memory here to the fall of 22. We were talking about some issues that the city was going to be facing a few years down the road financially. Is it possible maybe to get more detailed notes from the October and November meeting from last year? Because there was a big issue that was on there that, who was the previous director? Peggy or Denise brought up and said, here, this is something we're going to have to face a couple years down the road that we're going to have to address. I just remember it vaguely, and I'm like, it was a big hole in the budget that was coming.
Well, I think probably what you're talking about is the proposed expansion of police, fire, new station that was being
That was one of them.
studied,
Yep.
and what the financing would require.
DPW.
But I thought they had that cost neutral by closing down station, the one over by my house, no?
Not even,
No.
no.
All right.
Huge
So one of the business parts,
That's what
what I
you
think
proposed.
might have been proposed to be vacated and that building
Alright.
repurposed.
I'll go back and maybe I could just work with Dan and get those notes, because it was something that we had to think 3 to 5 years down the road on, and it was a big gap. So
Well, I think a lot of it was CapEx, that 3 to 5 year plan, when you looked at what was all out there
Yeah.
potentially. Now, all of it probably isn't
We got a big
materialized.
bubble coming up there.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think there was a big bulge with the next step of the growth.
Yeah.
Well, and I have on here that,
Long-term CapEx plan.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
And typically, that's something that we at least kick the tires a little bit, because it's part of the budget process, and you roll it forward a year and see what's still on the agenda, what's bubbled to the top, what's fallen off or whatever. And a lot of that, even in Franklin, is dictated around what our impact fees are. As you probably all well know, councilmen do, that we've been up, pretty much with our back against the wall sometimes with some of these fees, getting them spent, in proper categories. Mainly the park comes to mind.
Right.
Park and water.
Yeah, and I think there's park with the land purchase and water tower now that's coming on board. I think we got at least those two immediate, but that's kind of always a moving, and it's being added to with every new construction that's added as well. So kind of update and look at those as well.
As long as people are crediting Paul too, I'll give him credit for the pension side of things, where as our liabilities grow, we've also got investments that are maturing at the same time, so it's kind of an offset for the upcoming expenses.
Well, that's the ladder, the maturity. Now we're going through obviously a lull in the market or a downstroke, so it'll be a longer approach to hopefully recover that. But I think John, already mentioned it. Right? It's so unique. Any other municipalities that are facing big liabilities down the road that we've got the lion's share of them, covered. Yeah, will there be investment returns up and down the market? Absolutely. But if you were starting with where many communities are, where they got they're added to the tax base or tax collections that aren't, we're on the road.
Yeah, that's kind of brings another question. Paul used to manage a lot of the cash. Who's managing that now?
So a lot of that is being managed through, well, just Tom managing the cash aspect between cash, American Management Deposit, or American Deposit Management. But as far as that, we don't have a.
Yeah, we do. It's U.S. Bank took over.
Yes,
there.
that's
Investment advisor.
Yeah.
You're talking about the daily cash.
correct.
And
But the
that-
investment
right.
side, yes.
That was done, I think, right before year end. Peggy and I had some discussion about that, and I know it went to council, and I think they made that decision in December or January. And I did talk to Tom when those assets moved, I think. There again, there'll be another thing on our agenda. That's one thing kind of like to at least look at and refer on to the council how those assets are performing. As it turns out, there's an actual real computation of what those liabilities are. Probably not our number one thing with urgency with the budget coming around.
Right.
That'll be one thing. Counts obviously. And again, with a new investment manager there, that'll be it'll be good to get an update from them on kind of what's happened and how the market's been reacting, recovering.
I will ask that I will put something together for
Yeah.
us to meet to definitely some more knowledge on that.
Yep. I guess we're talking about first 6 month numbers. Any further questions there from anybody? I guess,
I found that kind of hard to work with. Just
I-
dump
and
a
I'm-
general ledger there.
yeah. And again, this might be, some of the oversights, I know. This
Yeah, it
one-
wasn't my intentions, I just didn't have a lot of time, so I at least try to get the cash and investment summary up, this is updated.
Speaking of that, do we have, how are rates now on our cash positions that have been moved up nicely here throughout 2023 with the rate movements? I don't see anything on here, but do you have any idea, Danielle, on kind of what we're getting on our liquid investment? American Depository, I think that's
Correct, and no, I don't.
And on that schedule, that property tax fund, that $11 million negative with American, I'm assuming that's gotta be just a transfer between
Correct,
general
and the property tax fund,
yeah, that's
yes.
our collection. Or-
Yep, we just
reallocated
finalized
that.
our settlement.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what. All right, anything further there, or comments that anybody has? Yeah, I think in the past, we've kind of had the 2 or 3 page oversight. Paul probably tell you, kind of just give us by category whether revenues are running ahead or behind or whatever. And again,
Major budget
surplus or deficit, year to date as well, and then kind of which line item like the running
Mhm.
alter or off from budget. And then
Well, I'm hoping that with each meeting I'll have more and more to keep adding to.
Yeah.
here, yeah.
It takes a lot of time to put this package.
Yep.
Mhm.
Should we move on unless someone has any? I think we want to talk a little bit about probably budgeting for 24 and what the schedule might look like. I mean, typically that's in the past has been what, late September-ish?
Yes.
October.
First one kicks off late September.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you guys would typically meet before the mayor's recommend budget is presented in September, or if you would meet after? After, okay, so the mayor presents the budget, and then it comes here.
Well, again, that's kind of been the mayor's, you know, that's kind of his project. Well, that's kind of what the prior mayor, he would do the presentation. You guys at staff would work on it, put it together, present it to the council, and then usually his request to the council is right away. Well, let's get the finance committee to look at it, and you know, does this all make sense, or do you know, or did some of this see any issues with it, or maybe opportunities for, you know, whatever, given, you know, kind of again the whole plethora of information that goes into it. Wow.
Well, last time we had a schedule for when department heads were presenting, and we had the opportunity to be present and ask questions of the department.
So I thought that was important. So if I could put my 2 cents in, that was valuable time to ask questions and do it. So I want to keep that format going. Great.
So again, would that be done before the mayor recommends his budget, or would
No.
that be after? Okay.
After.
So that is done on September 19th. So that being said, department head meetings should start happening right after that.
Well, we did multiple meetings in October, did we not?
Yes.
Yeah, if you look, and again, Paul would have a schedule, or we had about 3 or 4 meetings, and because we have half the council members here, and then some of the other council members, if they wanted to come or attend, they welcome as well. But we just basically have the department head go through kind of their budget presentation after it was released, and talk about the new ads, new positions, labor, or whatever. 75% of what the fund is labor related, benefits, et cetera, and kind of go through that. And then it really gave, I think, the council members on our committee depth to go back and share with their cohorts, if you will, because they're the ones who have to vote on it, up or down or whatever. Of course, the mayor and staff are going to be involved in anticipation of that. So probably rehash for you to sit through again, but I think the benefit maybe from staff standpoint is there's so much information that goes in, and it's coming in from so many different places, and timing, there's gaps in it because we don't get stuff until October or November for certain areas to plug in. When we go through that review, a lot of times it's just a lot of cleanup happen by default.
That's what I was going to ask you. If you had, it sort of sounded to me, and I might not be taking it out correctly, but that maybe there's a recommendation to bring it to this meeting first before bringing it to council, or no? No? Are you fine with that process?
Well, again, it's not us to decide. It's what the mayor and the council want. In the past, the mayor wasn't really, some number of years ago, wasn't that involved in the budget process. That was very laborious and being disjointed, right? I mean, now at least it's, you know, admin and the mayor's, you know, police department says he wants 6 police officers, and, you know, you guys decide on it's going to be 2 or 4, you know, whatever. I mean, that kind of gets all vetted out beforehand. Numbers have to kind of look good as a whole. What's the tax base going to look like? You know, you're managing kind of all the numbers at once, if you will. Gets, you know, put in, and then it's the mayor's recommended. I mean, that's what.
We're not going to be changing that format, so to speak, because I liked how the timelines fit together, and I felt it was very effective to have that, you know, here's our initial proposed document, and then the department heads come in, and the department heads, you know, I spent 4 years in this committee as an alder, so I like that aspect of how that worked. And I thought that was effective. And then we also can move along, and this is going to be, I mean, I've already, you know, we've brought back department head meetings that had been
on for what, 7 or 8 years. And we hit right away with the department heads and what this is going to be. We are looking for a tight year in which to regroup on what we're going to plan for the longer term. But for this is kind of like a carryover from last year's budget, where we're not looking at it. We have some things we got to deal with, obviously, but we're looking for a lean budget this year moving in, and then so that's it's a reality. You know, cost we can in, but you know our investments have done pretty well, so we've gotten some more here, and talk to Danielle almost daily. So I think we're going to be in a good spot.
Well, we have a pretty nice surplus from 22 as well.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the vacancies, I mean, it's not maybe ideal, not the way we planned it, but it's kind of reality.
Some of the vacancy money, though, like we talked about, that's what I thought coming in. Oh, we got a lot. The planning director left July of 2022. Finance director left first week of January 2023.
But there's interim costs.
But and then the director of administration left mid-January, third week of January 2023. So you have that, but then you have you got other costs that, because I thought we were going to be way ahead, but we're not way ahead. But we're better off something. So we're not bad. But again, this is Monster Ball, it's a big one, so we'll be bringing. That's what we're going to do. We're going to give it as much time as we can get out early ahead of it, and move forward. But this is a great committee for getting things vetted. And fantastic. So very important. It will be rekindled.
Yeah, and I think, from just, prior year's comment, I think getting department heads out the information. I mean, again, police, fire, they know what their labor. I mean, this is not new rocket science for them. A lot of it is getting out, and I think the sooner you kind of get on the same page, or where it's at, or what opportunities or challenges, whatever they may be, get them out there. I think our role is transition more from kind of an overview and just vetting, listening to the presentations, and kind of going through it, and does it all kind of make sense, or do we is there something out of whack, or did we miss something? Why is this, or this is, or whatever? And I mean, some of that, even at the beginning, insurance rates and so forth, we don't it until November, or some of that stuff. So there's just so many moving pieces. But what's worked well in the past, and I'm sure chat with Paul, is once that process started, we were able to basically kind of just keep a running ledger worksheet. If we added things or recommended pluses and minuses, whatever, just be kind of updating it all, so that if we made a recommendation to the council at the end, you could just say, here's a list of 5, 8, 10, 12 things, or whatever, that impact on revenue, on expenses, how it affects the tax rate, bing, right through it. So that was kind of an automatic tracking as we went through. And we kind of just broke up the department heads, took the big ones, kind of fire, health, whatever, usually as the main one for that particular day, or whatever, and then a whole bunch of the smaller ones around them, and
I think the department heads who haven't been through that process 3 or 4 years, they've gotten better every year.
Yeah, I think so.
Especially overtime.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
And it gives them an opportunity to, I think, reiterate their wants and needs. They may say, hey, this is what we requested. Mayor's got this back, or whatever, staff, whatever. So they're doing some selling and negotiating or whatever at the same time. I mean, which is fine and dandy, but, they're again working off their own statistics and numbers and what they want to see or would like to see. But sometimes the real world is different than the way they use it as a separate issue. But I think it's a good venue for them to kind of be able to. And those meetings were open if the public wanted to come and sit in, or had a interest in it.
So those were typically at night, as like a finance
last-
meeting? or-
Yeah, the last few years, what we did, we started them early and kind of tried to do like 4 till 7 or something like
Okay.
that. Because then the staff was here, they could plan on it, and we try to get them in and out as soon as possible, or the major ones, whatever. We used to have some that would go from, midnight, it was
Terrible.
just crazy. Yeah. It was budget, arguing over $10 or $20, whatever. Supplies line, it was crazy. But, yeah, I mean, pick 4 or 5 days or whatever, kind of divide up the departments, and we kind of, I think last year worked pretty well. I mean,
Yeah,
most
last
of
year
them were
worked
2.5, 3 hours, we took a break in the middle, sometimes, or whatever, and kind of just, had the big budget books and kind of look at them in advance, answer questions. And, of course, the council members that are on this committee, are, as I said, I think they get the biggest benefit because they get to see the budget at a much, what I refer to, the level that maybe their counterparts do or take the time to study. Does that sum it up, John?
Yeah.
And
It's
Joe?
all right.
Yep. Nope. Last year's format was perfect. And again.
Yeah.
The early start's not a problem for me in case we get into October. Not a problem. So I have no problem
I'm
coming
sure
in at 3
Tom
o'clock.
probably has a budget sheet or timeline for last year.
Mhm.
Pull that out as. I think those meetings I remember because I was out of town until the end of September. I think I might have missed the mayor's presentation, but then we had like 2 a week. Whatever. To the timeline, just kind of work it backwards from
Right.
got to be published.
I don't remember him presenting to the finance committee. Did he?
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't there either. All right.
Well, he made some opening comments, I guess.
Okay.
Who did, Tom?
Yeah. But. Yeah, and I would concur. I think it belonged pretty well, and it was, I think, effective. I don't know what the comments were back from the department heads. You may want to ask them as well if they've got other suggestions. And I mean, they weren't necessarily overly long, I don't think, but I mean, it's laid out, what they requested, what the mayor's budget recommendation is, and their sharing or whatever, their ads or missions or what's changing year to year or whatever, kind of working right through.
So, working on that portion, get going on that, and then as far as the capital improvement, I have that pretty much all put together. Paul and I are working on now the revenue sources.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we did all of those capital funds kind of as a separate night.
Right.
I mean, basically,
Okay.
you and the 2 of you, and we had that discussion kind of internally, and I don't know if obviously the mayor's more than welcome to be there as well, but those necessarily don't involve each individual department, so you can just kind of, do all those big items, insurance.
Fire trucks,
Yeah,
buildings.
some of that stuff we left till the end because we're not getting it something. Costs are good. Like,
Yeah.
estimates. Justify or say verify if those are good. Closer. Some of those insurance rates. Anything else, John, that you remember, or Joe? Mike, or Nick? I thought it went pretty well though.
Yep, the process was smooth. And I think the department heads need to present their budgets in a formal manner. So I thought it was a good format. It also gave us opportunities, I felt, to ask some questions you know, there's some topics that came up that were important, I thought, too, about, you know, compensation for the police officers. Last time they got merit increases and things like that, that we can present to the mayor, maybe something for the years to follow. So, good.
And I think, again, this committee is sometimes an opportunity, again, following comments, Jason, kind of look at this longer term factor. Well, that budget is kind of covers 12 months, 365 days. Well, you know, when we're spending $200,000 to plan for a new fire combination station that's going to serve that part of the city for X number of years, obviously there's going to be foresight in that. You know, how do you envision running that? How's it going to be staffed? You know, what's happening long term, not just 1 year.
Look, the unintended consequences come with decisions in the moment, sort of.
Funded.
Agree.
Well, and one thing to build or fund the CapEx, but then what's going to be ongoing operating costs as well. In some cases, size and efficiency bring size and quantity brings efficiency. Sometimes not all fit together exactly as well. So I think it's a good opportunity for the department heads to make sure that they're looking at an all-encompassing well, even though the object at specific night is setting what the tax base is going to be, the rate that year. The taxpayers want to know that, and the council members go out with that information. But those decisions have multi-year.
Kelly, you have a report from the consultant that we use for capital improvement budget as far as upcoming maintenance, repairs, priorities?
No.
Is that from IRS?
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I will work with Bob to get that.
I mean, they're the ones that have been looking at
Right, what's
priority
going on.
repairs and things. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we've finished, had enough discussion on item 7 here, I guess. That's committee review of the mayor's recommended budget, kind of forthcoming timeline, whatever. I guess what I would probably recommend, Danielle, is just put some dates together. Might work for your calendars, and then we can look at them and see how it fits in with ours and try to kind of those as well. But I think that timeline.
So putting some dates together, well, for the three of us to meet, and also the department head.
Yeah.
So after September 19th, I have at my desk the timeline, the budget timeline. So I don't remember, it's October something,
right.
But getting those dates.
And what I would suggest is that if we do, try and give us a day in between or whatever, so we got 6-8 departments, kind of spend a little time in advance doing it, have a day off to kind of get ready for the next one or whatever. But it's got to fit what's going on in the city calendar too. But we had 2 weeks that were I think, 2 meetings a week or whatever.
Yeah.
Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, or something.
Sure.
Whatever fits in and work to get us to. Yeah.
Okay. At 9, just agenda items.
Future items. I think we heard a couple tonight. Be the OPEB investment. I'm sure U.S. Bank will prepare some presentation. They do that. We're not the first one. They'll have some type of, I don't know what their model. We should get on their agenda. Gifts we talked about.
Notes from last fall's meeting. reviewing asset performance, assessment, rate, summary funds.
And the council did, we covered the solid waste, right? John, did that get extended last fall? Or-
Yeah.
No, that was in front of us with John's disposable. Did we extend that for a full 5
Yes.
years? Is that what I saw?
Yes, we did that for John.
Okay. Just trying to think in terms of what type of, ongoing operating. Schedule timeline somewhere that we don't miss anything there. Let something go by that we can't. So our next regular scheduled meeting, hopping down to item 10, is the 26th, but you're going to present the budget to the council on the 19th?
Yes.
And that is the 19th, what day? That's
September.
Third Tuesday.
third Tuesday? Because what I've done with this committee is I've encouraged members, at least the citizen member, they're available to come to that meeting as well. Because John may or may not come to our meeting, comment remarks, but we want to hear right get-go and, glean information. I think it's helpful for, I know I've done that in the past, if my schedule permits, I thought it would be helpful, but if it doesn't, we'll pick it up and see it as well. Usually, you're giving the highlights of that, how many, new additions or new positions, the add, subtraction, head count, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe the CapEx items in there too, the projects forward or so I will make a note on that, 19th of September. And the 26th, as it turns out, we may end up wanting to use that date if we're ready to go, ready by that time to, as one of the
First
3 or
ones.
4 dates.
Kick off it. Yep. Kick
Yeah.
off.
Which is fine. Would you just like me, or would that be Lisa that would send out something if I move up the time from 6 o'clock earlier then to get some apartments?
Yeah. She usually did that.
Yeah, she's been following up with both of us leading up to this as well.
Yeah. And I think she usually keeps track of kind of
Keeps us all in line.
Yeah, she does.
Anybody have anything else?
I do not.
I think we can make a motion to adjourn. I know there's been a lot of information, a lot of, you said, I'm sure drinking the fire hoses the whole time, but it sounds like it's.
Yeah, we adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We are adjourned.